Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to make a start in a few minutes. We're just waiting for a few more people to enter the room. My name is Louise and I'm based in London. It'd be good to get a sense of where everyone is based if you want to let us know using the chat function here. And we'll make a start in just another minute. Thanks to anyone who's joining us just now. We are going to make a start in a moment, but it'd be great to get a sense of where everyone is based. I know our speakers today are in South Africa and Switzerland, so it'd be good to get a sense of where everyone else is from.
New Zealand, wow.
Oh, cool, New Zealand or London.
Everyone is in London. Oh.
Okay, I think we'll make a start now. But so thank you everyone for joining us. It's evening here in London, and my name is Louisa Uliet. I'm curator of talks and events at the Photographic Gallery. I'm really excited to be here this evening with Nonzuzo Gxekwa and Anke Loots. Both currently have work on display at the Print Sales Gallery at TPG as part of Presence, 5 contemporary African photographers, which will remain on display until the end of August. Today they are joined by guest curator Julie Bonzon, who will say a little bit more about the exhibition tonight as they look through the intersections across their very distinct visual narrative of representing the everyday of South Africa, its people and its place. I hope you have a chance to visit the exhibition if you are in London, which also features the work of Hamilton Nevis, Leonard Pongo, and Mario Masulo, who will also be joining us for a talk on Tuesday, the 3rd of August. So please keep an eye on our website for updates on that. Anyway, thank you all for being with us tonight. In terms of format, we will begin with a conversation with Nonzuzo and Anke, moderated by Julie Bonzon for roughly 40 minutes. After that, there'll be opportunity for questions and comments from you. And you can submit them using the chat function here, or they can be posed directly to them at the end by using the blue hand raising function here. And we will then ask you to unmute yourself. So the event should last roughly 1 hour in total. Please note we are recording this. However, you will not be featured and will only appear at the end if you decide to pose your question directly. And we are approaching this event with the aim of creating a forum of trust and mutual respect. So please keep that in mind with your comments. And we hope to see you again at some of our other forthcoming online activities, and even more hopefully at the gallery where you can see their work in person, along with our two other exhibitions, which include the Deutsche Börse Photography Foundation Prize and the Picture Library. Anyway, thank you all again. And now to Julie Bonzon, our moderator for this evening.
Thank you so much, Louisa. Thank you for everyone for coming here tonight. It's lovely to see you all. I'm just gonna share my screen if that's okay. Let me just do that now. So you can see, this presentation here. So just to thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you very much for the Print Sales Gallery and the Photographers Gallery for hosting this event. And I'm so pleased to be joined by Anke and Nonzuzo tonight. Just to introduce the project very briefly. So I've been working with a Print Sales Gallery team on an exhibition featuring works by members of the Photographic Collective on an exhibition focusing on contemporary African photography. The Photographic Collective was founded about a year ago and is designed to give more visibility to artists working and living in Africa. And I just wanted to give you a short virtual tour for those of you who haven't been able to see the show yet. I hope it will give you, that you will want to see it after that. But I think it would just give you a short, brief overview of what how the room is like and what are the works on the wall. Starting with Nonzuzo. Then Leonard Pongo. Mario Masulo. Anke Loots. And Hamilton Nevis here. So it's been relatively challenging, but also very exciting to curate works in that space. I mean, the Photographic Collective is composed of about 23 artists now. So choosing the selection was very difficult, but I was so pleased with the result. I mean, those are 5 artists, as I said, Nonzuzo Gxekwa, Leonard Pongo, Mario Masilao, Anke, Loots, and Hamilton Neves, who are from South Africa, Mozambique, or the DRC, and are all engaging in very different practices. And we thought that the display can give a quite good overview, quite a good glimpse of what narratives and practices are being created by those photographers today. And I'd like to start the conversation by starting this conversation with Nonzuzo specifically, and then we'll move on and have a conversation with Anke as well. And this is supposed to be quite informal, so I'm gonna have a conversation with Nonzuzo first, Anke, but of course, Anke, if you want to jump in, feel free, Nonzuzo as well, the same. So those 2 works are on display in the exhibition right now. I should say that the exhibition is on until the end of August. There is still time to see it in London. And I'd love to know a bit more for people who don't know you in Nonzuzo yet, but I'm sure they will soon. I would love to know a bit more about your photographic journey. How did you start with photography, and about those 2 works specifically? If you have any stories about those 2 works specifically and how they relate to your broader practice.
Sure. So I'm a self-taught photographer from South Africa, and basically I'm just interested in everyday life, simple moments, and coming to this works, really, this is my nephew, really, who I love spending time with. And this was just him getting ready for school. And he was going through the stage where he's just exploring how he looks, and I guess being excited about girls and all that stuff. So this was a time when this particular hairstyle was in fashion, and he was just really, really crazy about it. So I think how he was when he was getting ready, that just really drew me in, and that is basically how that picture happened. And the other picture is really just on the streets of Johannesburg, the street vendors who sell vegetables. And there was something about this young man that was just really striking, how he was dressed, the colors, and how he just presented himself, and that just drew me to him. And I think I was surprised by the Chiefs on the back of his jacket, which just reminded me of our soccer team, Kaizer Chiefs, which has been around for a very long time. So that really got me excited. And I think that is what made the image for me more than anything else. And I think just the colors as well. Their colors is like yellow and black, which is surprising. So I think it just worked out beautifully. But I think a lot of my images about identity, how people see themselves or not, or how I see them, usually drawn to how people can be in very simple settings and stuff, but they still carry themselves with so much confidence, and they take time to make themselves look beautiful. So, yeah.
What I find quite fascinating, I think when I first met you online, because we never met physically yet, but when we met online a year ago, I think, I was so interested in this Instagram page that you have, Taxi Diary, and the amount of portraits you take, and in all of those different settings. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about that. And I wonder as well if the Instagram page started with your work as a photographer, or how do you play with both?
So the Taxi Diaries _ Nonzuzo started with me commuting to work every day. And there was just something beautiful about moving from a very quiet suburb of Craigle Park to the CBD, which is chaotic, colorful, there's a lot of noise, it stinks. And yeah, so that kind of, I don't know, it made me excited. And I was like, this is the part that we don't see all the time, you know. Even people who see it, you know, they don't really pay attention to it. And but also it was just like, it's ugly, it's, I don't know, there's something about it that is disturbing, but in spite of that, there's like all those beautiful moments, you know, the people, the colors, the way people put things together, you know. It's like there's a part that I pass every day and it's full of guys from Zimbabwe, you know. And when you pass them, you know, it's like they've developed their own clothing style, like how they dress. So they've got those pants that are unique to them, the way they wear their capes, the way they interact with each other, you know. There's so much love and intimacy between them, you know, which is like really small things that we don't pay attention to, but they're beautiful. And, you know, in the chaos, they just make life seem okay, I guess. And yeah, so I think it was just me interested in the little moments that I think are beautiful, but we don't pay attention to.
Mm. And where were you traveling back and forth?
So I work in a bookstore, the Commune in Braamfontein. So I'd be traveling from my house and I'd be going through to Hillbrow, then end up in Braamfontein. Yeah, and it's like a 30-minute drive. And I mean, I've chosen to use public transport in Joburg, which is very dangerous, and it makes me anxious and all that stuff, because the drivers are like always rushing, they drive badly and all that stuff. But there's also something very exciting about that. And you also just learn to hear people's stories, you know, like the taxi drivers will tell you, hey, we're rushing because we're trying to make enough money to give to the bosses, then they can make their own money, you know. The commuters themselves, they're very late, you know. Some people come from Soweto, some people come from Orange Farm. By the time it's 8 o'clock, they're late for work, you know, and it's like they're rushing the drivers. So I don't know, there's small relationships that also develop within that space. That is always very interesting, because strangers would be talking to each other, you know, discussing politics, discussing relationships, you know, which is something that you don't get anywhere else, I guess. So, yeah.
And that brings me to my next question. How did you choose the model as well? I mean, it seems to me that you sometimes have long-term relationship with them and photograph them a few times.
Honestly, most of the people in my images are people that I met on the street. I'm really drawn to clothes and how people present themselves. So it would be either how someone is wearing their hat or the color of the clothes or something, you know. And then with some people, we sort of like develop a relationship, and over time I'd use them like once or twice or more than that. And it's also, especially with young people, it'd be like someone is trying to get into the, like to do something on social media, Instagram or something, or YouTube. So it'd be like, okay, we can trade. I can take pictures and you can use them, you know, and then it just grows from there. So yeah, it's really interesting. Because I mean, I don't know, some photographers, they always feel like you have to build a long-term relationship to shoot people. But I always feel like with some images, it's just instant, it's intuitive, you know. You don't need to be spending weeks or days, you know. And then there's certain projects that I think they require that build up, you know, where you build a relationship, take your time and all that stuff. And I think with my nephew, it's kind of like that, you know, because I am around him, not all the time, but like when I come to KZN on holidays, you know, it's like we'll spend time and I'll get to hear his stories about school, where he is and his interest, you know, so yeah.
And do you photograph on the street and in studio as well? Do you have do you photograph in different kinds of things?
So the streets are like my first love, honestly, just because I feel like there's a lot of stories, you know, and nothing is staged. It's just me responding to what I see and all that stuff. And then occasionally, I mean, I've been exploring the idea of doing more conceptual work and just like being in studio and just thinking more about certain works. But I honestly just love the streets just for the fact that you are responding to a moment, you know, it's all intuitive, you know, nothing is planned. Yeah. And I mean, there's room for all kinds of stuff. But yeah, the streets are more exciting for me.
And it's quite amazing to think about how busy and, you know, crowded the streets can be, but you manage to find and, you know, create those pictures which look like, you know, they're perfectly composed. There is nothing disrupting the vision. It's quite amazing to be able to do that, despite it looks like a studio portrait, because you completely forget that you are taking the pictures on the. I mean, the viewer would forget that
just on the street.
Yeah.
I think with time, I guess you get better at choosing things, you know. And also, I think maybe because one uses the frames of windows sometimes, because some of the images are shot when I'm in a taxi. So maybe that plays a role in how the images come out and stuff. And I guess when one is walking, then it's a bit different, because some people I can stop and be like, hey, can I take a picture? You know, or it's just like one of those fleeting moments. And it's just like, yeah. Yeah.
And I have also two more images from different series, bodies of work that you took a little bit earlier than those two. Let me, yes, those two. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about it. I think this one with the two women is quite similar in the way, in a formal way than the nephew. And I was wondering if there was a theme in your photographic work running through here.
Yeah, so I'm fascinated by hair, you know, like Black women's hair, like just the way we play with it and the different things you can do with it, you know. And I think the past few years, there's been a shift, because a lot of times people would have like relaxed hair and then you'd get extensions and all that, but there's like a shift to more natural hairstyles. And I really enjoyed this hairstyle because it reminded me of my childhood. Like, this was the hairstyle one would get, you know, going to school and stuff, and just seeing women embrace it. And it has become a trendy hairstyle, you know, because before it'd be something you do when you are in a rush and you can't really fix your hair, or you are about to go to sleep and then in the morning you are tired, and then, you know. So those are two friends, really. The other one was plaiting the other one's hair. And I don't know, there's something intimate about women doing each other's hair and catching up and laughing and all that stuff. And I think just because the hairstyles are similar, I was like, oh, it made a really beautiful portrait, you know. And this is like one of my favorite pictures, actually. Like, I really like it. And the other picture really also, it just took me to my days in school where, you know, after school you hang out, girls who have boyfriends, you know, they're standing outside and chatting and like, so, but there was just something about how the legs, how they're standing, the colors just work so beautifully together. So I think those are all the small things that I look at when I take pictures. You know, I don't know. Sometimes I don't think the faces are important, but just like the body language or what people are doing, that fascinates me. So, yeah.
Yeah, for the poses, I mean, most of the time they are, you know, very empowering and very powerful and very confident as well.
Yes. So, yeah. Yeah.
That's really
So,
that's actually a great introduction to your work, and we're gonna we're gonna come back to those work when we have the conversation with Anke at the end.
awesome.
But Anke, should we move on and have a conversation about your work? So those four works are on display at the Prince House Gallery. Sorry, in the Photographers Gallery. And I was wondering about your practice more generally and how you engage with your surrounding in your everyday life with your camera. Because I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, and the idea of a diary, I think, was mentioned at some point, and I found it fascinating. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about that.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here, and Julie and Nonzuzo. It's so nice to look at your work. Wow, I have so many questions for you. I actually wrote down on my phone so I can remember them when I'm done chatting about my stuff. But yeah, thanks, Julie, for curating all of this work together, and for the Prince Hills Gallery for having us. And I really like the selection that they've made, and that you've made, Julie. I think it's everything speaks, so it's got like a really nice umbrella feeling to what my work is about. And I think for me, like, the biggest thing is that, and it's really nice that Nonzuzo also mentioned it, and our approaches are completely different, but there's also definitely a sense of finding like chaos in the everyday, and looking for, I don't know, like interesting things that light up and spark some kind of joy that normally you wouldn't notice. And that definitely comes in with having a camera with you, whether it's my phone or my actual digital camera that I work with. But yeah, I think the biggest theme in my work is finding a sense of stillness and calm in the chaos, and those moments of stillness really being present for it, and in my case capturing it. I don't know, many people would do something else with it, but I just happen to find photography really interesting. And yeah, this very fleeting and changing world, that there's this medium that can capture it in some form, even though it's only like two-dimensional at the end of the day, but that it can capture this 3D thing is yeah, I find it really fascinating. So, yeah.
Those works specifically are quite, I find them just so peaceful and relaxing. Even the fireworks is really relaxing, but I'm terrified of fireworks. And so I think when we talked a few weeks back, you mentioned your meditative practice, and I think this is so interesting in relation to your work, and I wonder if you could explain a bit more how you take photograph and what is the process behind it.
Yeah, so Julie, you mentioned the meditation practice. I think that's definitely something that inspires my everyday life, and definitely brings a sense of awareness to just everything that goes around you, right? And allowing you to be more aware of beautiful moments and being still to try and see them is, yeah, definitely a big way for me to take photos. I tend to spend a lot of time by myself. So if I look at all these images, it's most of them were on my own and with my camera and my tripod. And I just take like, yeah, like for instance, the cloud image was me away in nature for like a month without really speaking to anybody and just observing the landscape and seeing how the clouds were busy forming, and setting up my tripod and just waiting kind of for that moment where that one cloud kind of formed. And I was like, okay, cool, that's me like really focusing and being able to hone in on that moment to make that picture. And same for the fireworks. I remember you actually asked me quite a lot about the fireworks. Now it makes sense because you actually scared of it. But it was kind of the same moments, even when it was so chaotic. You know, obviously the setting, it was actually New Year's Eve and it was crazy and there was tons of people around, but it was almost like everything kind of closed in. And I saw this one firework that I was like, wow, that can make a really interesting pattern. And I fired a few shots and they were actually like, there's like a sequence of how they formed. But I just remember like the clarity that I felt when I saw that picture, you know. And I think for me, when I get to enter that space, when I really see the picture while I'm taking it, like beyond my camera, that's when I know I've made a successful picture. Or I don't know, I think my level of awareness and presence in the process of taking the picture really determines how good the picture turns out to be. And I find I draw a lot of my inspiration to making my images from a practice of stillness and breath observation and just being conscious and aware of sensations. And yeah.
And there are not many human figures in your work. There are a few. And could you tell us a bit more about this one specifically?
This is actually one of my very good friends, and we also went away on a weekend. It was actually more than a weekend. It was like a week-long retreat from the city, and just really getting back into contact with nature. And sometimes my work is very kind of found, like for instance the cloud or the fireworks, but other times it would be more a situation where I see the light happening on something reflecting. And if a subject's around, for instance, my friend, I would combine the two. So it's generally like a combination of found and then also kind of seeing a moment and making something out of it, especially when there's a good light source for me, like anything can really be in front of it. Yeah.
And looking at the bouquet of flowers on the left, I mean, I was surprised to know that some of them are dead and some of them are plastic and some of them are real. And I was quite interested in this notion of, you know, just still life in your work. And I have a few more images that I can just show to kind of open up the discussion about your practice, but about animals, about dead flowers. I mean, there's something about impermanence as well that I find super interesting. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about that, about your interest in those specific themes and this balance between those moments. I mean, those transitions.
Yeah, I use a lot of dead insects that I normally find, or I'll ask people to collect them for me, or I'll go, like there's a museum here close to my house that I sometimes go to go photograph things. But I really find this notion of us like trying to replicate something that used to be alive and make it seem that died and make it seem alive again. So for instance, those taxidermy animals, I don't know, I love how you can't really make something look real. You know, there's something so fake about them, but it's almost like it messes with your mind a little bit. And yeah, there's definitely a big play in the life and death cycle in my work, and using found animals and dead animals and that kind of imagery to mimic that, and to kind of portray the impermanence of this life and like the cycle of that. Yeah. And I think the still lives, like for instance, the flowers, yeah, there's something, I mean, to be honest, I'm quite obsessed with flowers. It's something that I spend a lot of time with, and I kind of actually have to really hold myself from posting about it on social media, because I think like people can get really bored about it. But I'm eternally fascinated with flowers and the beauty that they represent in this life, and the like effortless just effortless presence that any kind of flower or plant element can bring to any space. So there's really something for me, like bringing light with that, and just making a still life is something that I find really, really captivating. Yeah.
I think Nonzuzo is also working a lot on flowers, if I remember well. we could talk about that in a minute. And when I was looking at those 4 works together, I realized that they were taken in different places. So you also use your camera during your travel. I mean, do you travel? Do you use those images as a diary as well during your travel?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, now I haven't traveled in quite a while, obviously, but I used to travel quite a bit. And it would definitely, it would be my favorite time to photograph, actually, because normally when I go overseas, I'd switch off my phone and kind of log off my computer as much as I possibly can and just fully immerse myself in my camera. And those are the times that I've made the most interesting work, for sure, because it's almost like you just get into a slipstream of creating and nothing else distracts you, and it's just you and this tool. And I think with any other tool it would be the same. If you just continuously had to paint for like a month and end, like you're bound to make something good, in between all the shitty stuff that you made. Oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to. Okay. But yeah, I think traveling is definitely was like a complete immersion in photography, and I really look forward to being able to just spend time with my camera for like a month straight, because when you're at home, you're busy dealing with admin, and it's not like necessarily the safest place for a woman to be walking around with a big camera. And yeah, it's a bit of a different landscape in South Africa, but yeah.
And there's a kind of stillness and quietness in the work you're doing, and that I find is captivating. If you think about digital and the way digital camera works, usually taking a lot of pictures very quickly, very spontaneously, but it looks like, and for the Nonzuzo it's quite similar as well. I mean, it looked like every single photograph is I don't know, like a moment on its own, very carefully planned and thought through. And I find it quite interesting to think about that with the digital specifically.
Yeah, that's a good point, because obviously digital can be, you can just fire away, but I used to shoot film, and I didn't find that I could learn as quickly. The lag between seeing the images or seeing the result and knowing what I did in that moment in terms of exposure and light and all of that kind of thing, just I wasn't learning quick enough. So I switched over to digital, and I still kind of kept the principle of making sure that I get the shot in the first few frames and not like overshooting it, because in any case, like whenever I'd review the images and make my selects, at the end it would normally be the beginning of the photo, the beginning of the session anyway. Like the good photos would always be in the beginning. So you kind of just have to learn to trust yourself, and also, if it doesn't work in the first few images, there isn't really an image, in my opinion. So yeah, it's definitely like identifying that there's some kind of sense of stillness, and then being able to try and convey that as simply as possible. Like, I think that's what I really try and capture in my work, is for the audience to also try and feel that sense of like fleeting impermanence, and try and cultivate something still inside themselves as well.
Thank you so much. That's I love that. And now it brings me to the conversation between the two of you. I think you have questions for Nonzuzo, so I'm going to let you start the conversation, Anke. So yeah, if you have any questions for each other or any comments.
Can I go?
Yes.
I don't know if it's maybe a little bit of a controversial question, but I'm interested because our practices are so different on Nonzuzo. Like, you go out with your camera. I first want to know, do you shoot film? And how do you feel moving around as a female, like on the streets with a camera, and especially in like a place like Joburg and stuff, you know, because I find it so intimidating.
It is. I'm not going to lie to you. So I am slowly moving to film. I started with digital and I use my iPhone to make images. But also like the slowness of film, and just like me being curious about the basics. So yeah. But as for walking the streets of Joburg, it's really, really hard. So it depends where one is. So it'd be like, if I'm in comfortable places where I'm familiar with the area, then it's like, it's easy to take out the camera or my phone and shoot. But in areas where then it's like, I'll ask a friend to walk with me, usually a guy, or I'll just be in a cab, and then that is like one way of shooting when I'm around that area. But it's not easy. It's not easy. But at the same time, I realized that if you sort of force yourself to be seen with the camera, people respond differently. And the anxiety around that, it's not safe or whatever, kind of dies down a bit. So, yeah. And I also think on the streets, you have to learn the language of the streets, you know, like how people walk, how people talk.
Right.
And because I think that helps with breaking the barrier and how people see you. And recently a friend was telling me that, you know what, if you're feeling uneasy, just go to the person and be like, hey, what's up? That kind of, distracts them or something. So next time I'm on the streets, I think I'm going to try it. Yeah. So, and I really, really like that you shoot flowers, because I'm also obsessed with flowers and stuff. And but I'm also like fascinated by flowers that are dead, because I just feel they become something else. With you, do you like fresh flowers, or you don't mind, you just shoot all the flowers?
Same. It's definitely I kind of leave them to see the whole lifespan in my house. And then I also put them, what do you call it in English when you flatten flowers in like a book?
The drying process.
Yeah. I do that a lot.
Yeah.
So then it becomes really interesting when light shines through that like beautiful brown surface with all the veins and things. Yeah. Honestly, I could literally talk about the flowers for the next 2 minutes. And I sometimes feel like it's a bit of an easy subject, and like it's been done so many times before, but it's the most easy thing to shoot. It doesn't talk back to you. You can turn it how you want. But
I also like that you can sort of move them around and sort of like get different angles and stuff.
Yeah.
So
So are you still shooting your Taxi Diaries?
So the Taxi Diaries is like an ongoing series, but I think at the end of October, it might come to an end because I'll be moving from Johannesburg. I'll be in the Netherlands for a residency for a year. So
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
I don't know how that will go, but maybe when I'm that side, it'd be a different Taxi Diary kind of a thing.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
I had a question for both of you, if I may, because you're both based in South Africa, but in different places, and I was just wondering about the kind of photographic legacy here in that specific country, and if you think that it's still relevant to think about a South African photography or a photography which is related to where it's coming from in South Africa, or do you think that this is not really valid anymore?
An interesting
That's
question.
an interesting question. I've never thought about it actually.
No, because if I'm understanding your question correctly, it's like all the photographers that kind of have been big in the world of photography have all documented a very specific time in history in South Africa, right? Is that kind of what you mean? Yeah. And now it's kind of like all over the show and there's not anything specific happening. I don't know. I think, to be honest, it's very interesting that the photographers that are emerging from South Africa all like have a really creative angle and are really celebrating like a much more diverse and interesting story kind of beyond South Africa, if that makes sense, and telling stories that aren't like traditionally South African, but incorporate lots of different elements, you know, like if you think of all the South African fashion designers that are emerging from here, they're all like using different storylines from this country, but it's executed so differently to what you would think comes from South Africa. So I don't know, I think the landscape's changing so much and I think it's super amazing. I mean, for instance, you know, Nonzuzo, like the work that you make is so graphic. It's not necessarily, it's definitely African content, but it's not like in its content, but it's not like traditional African photography. I don't know if I'm making sense at all, you know?
But what is African photography? You know, I'm like, I don't know, like we moved from that political documentary stuff, you know, and we have
like struggle photography almost in a way.
Photography, yeah, which was mainly just violence and stuff. We didn't see the other stuff. We didn't see normal life, you know, people sitting and having tea and all that stuff, you know. And now we have this, like you're saying, a mix of stories, you know, which are all very exciting and all that stuff. But I'm like, what is African photography at the end of the day, you know? Like, I've always been curious about that. But I really love that there's different photographers bringing different stories, you know, though I also feel like photography is boring, especially from photographers in Johannesburg, because it all feels a bit similar. You know, it's like people are doing the same thing. It's street photography, a certain look, you know, and I think everyone is also trying to break into the international market. And I think the market wants a particular look, you know. And so sometimes I'm like, I don't know, you know, it's exciting that there's space, there's access, you know, but at the same time, there's like a particular thing that the market is pushing or is expected from photographers that are from Africa. But there's a lot of creativity as well, which is very, 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 I like that about yeah, the space we're in right now. But Julie, coming back to your question, I've not thought about that one. Yeah.
But it's quite, I think also with today with social media and the fact that, I mean, the photographic boundaries are also kind of expanding as well, because you can see so much content from everywhere. It's not necessarily geographically related. I mean, you would see things from every places. So that's also why I'm wondering if thinking about geographical particularities are still relevant to define a practice, a photographic practice. Yeah, it's open. I think it's we can think a lot more. Yeah. I don't know if you have any more questions for each other, but otherwise, yeah.
I was just gonna say I really love the firework image. I think when I look at it, it's like there's something inside that is just waiting to explode.
Well,
really
can I just say we can chat afterwards, and we can, because that one with the hair comb, I'm like, I wish I'd taken that photo.
Okay, you can do that.
It's so beautiful.
Like, your work is really, really beautiful, and I mean, Julie, thank you for bringing us together. Because
when I think of you, I just think, I mean, don't hate me for it being a cliche, but that nun photo with the two pink nuns from behind, oh my gosh, it is honestly, it's a dream. It's a dream. Like, don't stop making pictures like that. It's so special. The moments that you just see, like, people expressing themselves through their clothes and stuff, like, it's really evident in your work. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Wow. Yeah, that picture. Yeah.
I'm looking at the chat section to see if there are any questions coming through. So far, no, but anyone welcome to also shout if you have any questions, or raise your hand or unmute yourself to engage with those two photographers. Yeah, I mean, it's just so wonderful to be able to talk together like this. I mean, because when I think about the whole process, I mean, we haven't met yet, but we have been communicating and working together for like a year, which I find quite insane.
Which is, yeah.
Just a quick question, I guess. So if you could say a little bit more about, sorry, I just saw a comment come through in the chat function. Could you say a little bit more about what you're thinking about in terms of next projects or ideas that you feel like you haven't been able to visit yet? So Anke, you've spoken about flora in your work. Is there something else, some other directions that both you and Nonzuzo that you want to take your practice in?
Yeah, I mean, flora is definitely something that I kind of always continuously work on in the background without putting too much emphasis on it. But I'm trying to incorporate a little bit more of drawing and hand drawn techniques into my photography, which is really interesting because I actually spend a lot of time like making little drawings and sketches and writing. So I'm exploring ways of incorporating that into a possible next body of work that I'm working on. We'll see where it goes, but it's nice to have something that I can kind of do all the time, that I don't have to go out and shoot and be somewhere to produce. Yeah, it's kind of more in-house, which has been really fun. Yeah. And you, Nonzuzo?
Well, with me, a while back, I started shooting bodies, women's bodies. So that's a project I want to explore more and just see where it goes. I think it was just like just celebrating different shapes and just how we see our bodies. And I think this year just been like having body issues, and I was like, okay, I need to maybe focus the camera on myself and see if I can continue the work and where it goes. And also I've just been shooting more dead flowers, but with the idea of how as women we look at ourselves and aging and how we feel about that. So just kind of like looking at flowers and just thinking about the idea of beauty not stopping when we are young and stuff, but like as we get older, as we get wrinkles and all that stuff. So I'm hoping at the end of the year that will be done. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's really interesting that you're actually mentioning the body image stuff, because a lot of this project is that I'm busy working on is about body image stuff and kind of the writing that I've done in my journal, and just kind of moving through my own ways of seeing myself and I don't know, just somehow finding a way to put it on the outside and expressing it. Yeah, I think there's a lot of healing in that.
Does the writing come easy? Because I find that I really struggle with writing when it comes to my work. Like in my head, I'll see images and what I want to do, but like actually just like putting words to it is really hard.
I don't know. I just think when I'm writing for myself and no one else, you know, it's a lot easier, and I kind of just word vomit things out. And then revise it. But when I have like an idea of that I have to write it for something or someone, then I think about it too much. Yeah, so it needs to be more organic. I think there's a question.
Yeah, there's an interesting question from David. May I ask, in what way does your imagery reflect who and what you are as a person?
Wow. I think, I don't know, I think in my work, there's a lot of care and respect and gentleness and love. So I think all those things maybe, yeah.
Thanks, David, for the question. I think my work definitely relates back to me as someone who's a keen observer and paying attention to the ordinary, mundane things in the world, and trying to find a spark and joy of happiness in small things, and seeing the good in the world. I think that's definitely something that I kind of pride in myself, is trying to find the light in the world in between all the darkness. Yeah.
That's a very interesting answer. I was also wondering about Nonzuzo's interest, photographic interest and focus on clothing specifically. And I was wondering, Nonzuzo, if you had ever thought or doing to create, design clothes as well as part of your artistic practice.
Well, kind of, but I think I'm just scared. Right now, I just have a t-shirt that I do, and it's called Black, like it's written black. And that was kind of like one thing that I've tried to like explore, like work with and grow. And maybe in the future, I'll explore a bit more and play around with clothes and all that stuff. It's interesting because there's women in KZN who do beadwork, and I keep toying with the idea of like working with them and seeing what we create. But because of time, it's like it has not happened. But maybe in the future it will happen. Yeah, but clothes are really fascinating because it's like, it's always fascinating how people respond to a person based on how they dressed. You know, it's like someone will choose to speak to you or not speak to you, if you look clean or not clean or something, you know. So yeah, they're very, very interesting.
Looking forward to seeing this. I don't think there's any more questions, but thank you so much. I'd like to thank you both for being there. It was so great to learn about your work a bit more. And thank you, Louisa, for making this happen. And for everyone joining us tonight. I hope you had a good time. I think now it's time to have dinner and a glass of wine, I think. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. Just to echo Julie's words, and especially to our speakers tonight, Anke, Loots, Nonzuzo Gxekwa, and Julie Bonzon. To my colleagues, especially your team in the print sales, for the support in preparing for tonight. And to you all here for your ongoing commitment to the gallery. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without you, so thank you. And we continue to be grateful to be welcomed into your homes and to have the opportunity to share beautiful and important work of these wonderful photographers. If you have a moment, do keep checking our website for more details on what's to come. I hope you're all okay. And we have our next talk on Tuesday next with Carolyn Sinders, who's currently featured on our media wall, and she'll be in conversation with Tamiko Thiel. So thank you all again, and see you all very soon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.